All right, guys, we're excited to be here. If you're not, just grab cold water, drink it, and smile because life is not that hard. Welcome to another wonderful edition of APVA Awards 2023, and we are in the house with a beautiful Edo queen. Respect. Oh no, that's not how to do the queen thing. Sorry. Uh, not about Tokbe, Queen Tokbe. So yeah, she's from Edo. She's beautiful. She's awesome, and she's one of our watch party hosts, and she's here to share some insights about some things that we could benefit from. So without any further ado, let's meet our beautiful guest, Tan. How you doing today, Miss Tan?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good, Gwen. Thank you so much for trying to do that whole.
Don't mind me. It was beautiful. God, and she has a beautiful smile. Oh my God, I'm crying already.
Thank you so much for having me on board. Yeah, I'm ready to have this conversation. I can tell you I'm going to have fun already.
I'm excited about that. So before we dive into all sorts of topics that we have lined up for you, just tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about yourself, how you do what you do, and how come you keep that beautiful skin, girl. What's your routine? But
Ooh.
don't spill the secret here. Let's just do all of our podcast. So tell us about your journey, how you got here.
Okay, so my name is Tiyan. So currently my 9 to 5 or my day job is I work in digital marketing and
Hmm.
communications, basically.
Nice.
And I started off on radio, actually. I have a short stint on radio and TV as well, because I studied mass communication in school and fresh out of school, went for to journalism school as well, and then got, an internship at a radio station. I did that for a bit and then learned a few things along the way, and then had a few stints on TV as well. Um, After that, did a little bit of this and that in the media space. And then I started hosting podcasts. That this was in 2017. I still do actually. So I'm currently a podcast host. And now I produce using my skills, my knowledge that I have garnered over time as a podcast host. So now I produce podcasts for other people. And um, in 2020, I created the Podcasters Hub NG. So at the time when
Wow.
I started, yeah, excuse me, at the time that I started podcasting, I realized that, the community for podcasts it wasn't that strong in this part of the world, right? In
That's
Nigeria,
true.
we have a lot of, yeah, there were just like sprinkles of podcasters here and there. There was Osage of Loose Talk and, a bunch of other people at the time, right? And I kept on searching offline, online for a community that I could just because I struggled at a lot at the time because podcasting was like maybe 7 years in Nigeria, right? It gained traction around like 2010. That's in this part of the world in Nigeria, right? And so it was still fairly new. So when I tell people that, oh, I'm a podcast, they go, oh, where can I watch it? Where can I listen to it? How does it work? There were a lot of questions unanswered, and I would always explain. And I felt like, am I the only one that is feeling this? Because it felt like I was drowning, right? So I started to
Hmm.
search for communities and stuff. I got a couple of people, but there was no like community that I could say that I could always refer to or run back to when it's time or when I have questions or whatever, which is what spurred me on to start the Podcasters Hub. Now, the major thing that we focused on and that we still focus on is just amplifying the voices of Nigeria and by extension, African voices to the world. That's just what we basically do. So we organize live podcast sessions. We organize just community hangouts. Basically, we share stuff and works of podcasters and voiceover artists straight out of Nigeria, straight out of Africa to the world. And from that, collaborations with podcasters even outside the shores of the country have been sparked. So yeah, That's basically what we do at Podcasters Help in a nutshell. And that was born, from my journey so far, diving into podcasting and now becoming a podcast community builder.
That is amazing. So you saw a need. So guys, the summary is from her journey on the media space and podcasting, she saw a need to fill, and that is building a community for thriving and successful podcasters to come together, learn from each other, build something meaningful with what they do. And to be honest, that has been a successful journey for you, and that's why you're here, and you're the most important person to talk about this topic of storytelling and how it's shaping the world and how podcasting is using that tool to shape Africa. So before we all go into stuff, we got some questions from the audience asking what is storytelling? As mundane as that may sound, it's ambiguous too because there's storytelling in all parts, all sessions of media, even in our everyday life. And when you're broke, sometimes you want to ask your elder brother for money. The power of storytelling influences how much they give you.
Yes, I agree.
Preach it, right? So
Yeah.
storytelling is everywhere. So that question is important because what is storytelling in the context of podcasting? Do you want to just help us with that one?
Okay. So I like to think of storytelling as um, perspectives and narratives, right? So two people can tell a story, but you enjoy one more than the other. Why?
That's true.
The person is using it's all in how you're telling the story. Is how you make the other person feel while you're telling that story. If you're supposed to, if the goal is for the other person to empathize with you, and they don't do that, or you don't get that from them at the end of telling your story, then you've missed the mark. And the beauty about storytelling is the fact that you can swing a story the way that you want it. You can sway the crowd the way that you want it. Now, in the instance of podcasting, you can sway your audience in the direction that you want them to go, right? So for me, storytelling is about perspectives and narration. And of course, because it's storytelling, right? You have all of these things to explore. You have sound, you have sound bites, you have music, you have even pauses. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you're listening to maybe a radio show or a podcast, for instance, right? And then, the narrator just pauses for a minute to probably let whatever was said sink in, or because there is a cliffhanger somewhere, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's the beauty of being able to infuse everything into all that you're doing to make it wholesome. So, in my opinion, storytelling um, is has a lot to do with perspective and narration, basically.
That's beautiful. So the two keywords now is storytelling is how we use the power of narration and also our perspective to shape what we want to see from the
Yeah.
people listening to us, practically our audience. So just like a puppet to a puppeteer, we could actually determine what the audience get to feel because we are all stack of emotions in a shell, and a podcaster can use that to their advantage. And that brings us to the next question from the crowd as to how do we use or harness the power of storytelling by our perspective and narration, and also giving the audience room to manifest themselves through whatever it is we're projecting? How do we use that to shape our culture, our future in the African space through podcast and storytelling?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you ask this because a couple of weeks ago, myself and a colleague of mine, we're talking about this. He's a podcaster as well, and we're just talking about how um how podcasting has evolved in these parts over the years. And so recently, I was listening to a podcast. It's called um Bo. So Bo is a Yoruba word that means hear or listen, one of the two, or can be used interchangeably, right? So,
Okay.
so for that podcast, it's using uh folklores and folk tales to pass on a message, right? Which I really
Interesting.
thought was beautiful, which I really thought was beautiful because in times past, traditions, stories, and tales were passed down generation to generation through oral narration, right? So I actually think and believe strongly that podcast is just or podcasting is just a modern tool to continue to pass down that all of those traditions and culture and stories and folk tales and folklores and all of these things that make us who we are as Africans, right? One of the things that I would say is, in as much as you want people to listen to you, you want people to to listen to your podcast, jump on, whatever it is that you're saying. Authenticity is key. Authenticity is a very, very crucial tool in this, in sharing your perspectives and narratives. Because the truth is, so I always like to tell people that um so sometimes I give podcast coaching classes, right? And for those that attend my coaching class, I usually like to tell them that um, for podcasts and podcasters, you will always find your own community. You always find people that can relate with whatever it is that you are telling, whatever story it is that you are telling at that time. You will always find someone that can relate. So authenticity is key because the truth is, because if I listen to a podcast and I know that, oh, it drops every Wednesday, it drops every Monday, and every other Monday I'm looking forward to listening to that podcast. I've already become part of that community. Now, the downside of not being authentic is if you begin to, oh, let me do this because trending, it's what and what. It's not a bad thing to jump on trends, right? But in the middle of jumping on threads, don't lose what gives you that authentic touch to begin with. Now,
Mm.
if you're jumping on, you say, okay, I want to jump on trends and stuff. The truth is, your community people can smell it. They can actually hear it when you're not being your authentic self. So I would say that in using our narratives to shape who we are and what we do as Africans, authenticity is key, right? Authenticity is key. So if when you're authentic, you become more relatable. You become more relatable to the next person that is listening to you. Now, while
Yeah,
it
true.
is it is now while it is interest or while it is good that your podcast travel beyond the shores of the country, which is part of the goal as podcasters, right? When you stay true to yourself, when you stay true to your experiences, right? Even people that listen, imagine talking about something as a Nigeria that lives in Nigeria, or maybe you're doing a throwback episode of how it was when you were growing up as a Nigerian child here in Nigeria. Imagine someone that grew up in Nigeria but is now in another country, maybe is now in the UK, and that person listens to that podcast. How do you think that person would feel? It will bring
Nostalgic.
that sort of nostalgic feeling, right? And then, bam, like that, you've won over someone into your community. So I really think that, in storytelling, in, sharing our perspectives and just using the power and tool of narration, authenticity is key.
That is amazing because there are three things you've mentioned here that is quite important in the journey of a podcaster. So, for example, the wonderful nominees we have in this awards this year, when you listen to their podcasting, they use that tool very well. So, having your narration on point, where it keeps it interesting, involved, and also authentic to the story and using it to pass on your message is what makes you stand out. And
Yeah,
if you lose your authentic self because you're jumping on trends, that is doing the reverse, going
exactly.
anti-clockwise. And I think and I do think that all what you've said so far is very important. And luckily you've mentioned trends. And that is what we wanted to talk about. How do we leverage on technology and trends and things that are happening around us in pushing our voices through podcasting and shaping our world around us? How do we leverage on that? Not negatively, but positively, like you were trying to identify the negative part of jumping on trends and losing your authentic self. And also, it's also cool to jump on trends sometimes. So,
Yeah.
where is the balance? How do we leverage that?
Hmm. So this question, even I struggle with it sometimes.
Okay, so we'll
Even
figure
I
it out.
struggle. Yeah, even I struggle with it because some of the times there is that itch to jump on conversations that are happening now, right? And jumping on things that are timely now. But we know that because of the nature of podcasts, they are stored in the cloud, stored in the internet. So people still have access to them even after the timeliness of whatever it is that you were discussing has elapsed, right? So what I
Mm-hmm.
try to do is, if there's an ongoing conversation that I really want to get on, I get on that conversation, share my 2 cents, but still make it relevant. So here's how you make the podcast relevant, even after the timeliness of whatever it is you are discussing has elapsed, right? You
Okay.
identify what it is that you want to jump on, talk about it, then find a holistic view of it. I'll give you an instance. During the NSAS that happened here in Nigeria, in some parts of Nigeria, Lagos was at the forefront of this, right? A lot of podcasters did episodes of on that. I did episodes on that even a year after, when we were still counting the loss that happened the previous year. I did an episode on that as well. However, during the answers crisis itself, I jumped on that, but because I was careful, because my podcast is not political based, but I knew that everybody was hurting. This particular issue was affecting the entire nation, right? It would have been insensitive of me to
That's true.
release an episode and then I'm coming to talk about lifestyle or travel or something. It felt insensitive at the time. What I now did was, NSAS is here. Okay, let's talk about it, right? And
Yeah.
NSAS came like, we're just coming out of one lockdown happened, right? And then NSAS is coming. So what I now did was, okay, let's talk about NSAS, SARS, right? And then I talked about how to care for your mental health in times like this. So that way, I'm talking
Fantastic.
about the problem that is timely. And even from years to come, people will still listen to that and, we will still be able to relate to that because I also talked about something that that goes beyond time, right? talking about mental
Yeah,
health cannot be overemphasized. We need to constantly have those conversations, even after now. So that's what I mean by if you want to jump on a trend or on a conversation that is happening now, find the way to balance it out. At least that's what I do. The way to balance it out is find a holistic topic to use to sort of put it together in such a way that that content still remains timely, even after the timeliness of that conversation has elapsed.
that's amazing. Just to read something from here from one of the audience watching you. By the
Yeah.
way, some persons are actually saying you're beautiful. So yes,
Oh,
thank
thank
you.
you.
So this person is saying that for me, having to give a shout out or talk about something that is happening at a particular time based on trend, give you like a 5 minute or 10 minute time on your podcast can be a way to jump on trends and still keeping your authentic voice. What
Yeah.
do you say about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, as I said, you have a community of people that follow you, that listen to you. So if you feel like, okay, I don't want to jump on this completely, yes, this would be another way to go. Acknowledging what has happened. Say, um, um, okay, let's use politics for instance. We just concluded elections in Nigeria recently, right? You don't If your podcast is not political based, right? You don't have to do a complete episode where you're talking about why people should vote. If you want to, that's fine. But a quick mention here and there, a quick mention at the beginning of your episode, telling people to go vote. Of course, trying to be as neutral as possible, telling people to go vote, exercise their civil rights and all of that. And then while you're closing out the episode, you chip in a few things as well. That would tell your audience that, okay, you know what? This person is mindful of what is going on in the country. She's mindful or he's mindful of what is happening around us, but still, he or she wants to give us the premium content that we signed up for. So yes, I agree. This is a good way to infuse that.
That's amazing. And to bring us to the really towards the end of this discussion is particularly stereotypes, boxes. It all trends in all parts of storytelling, in cultures, in families. However,
Yeah.
I want to be careful with this because the whole world is going crazy, right? And everybody is either you're having someone so extreme left or so extreme right. I've never seen an extreme middle. Maybe Tolulokpe, who's our audience right now. Maybe he's the extreme middle. But the point I'm trying to say is, though we are trying to break stereotypes or
Yeah.
though we're trying to get a balance. For me, I don't think stereotype is bad. There's some people who should maintain or who should remind us of where we're coming from, of the box that existed, and not just everybody going out of the box and then we lose our way and we don't even have a box to return to. Like we're just in the field. But that's aside, guys. That's just me just putting that out there because that brings to the next question is how do we African podcasters break down the stereotypes, the challenges that's existing in our narratives, in our perspective, and how we project it, but also trying to maintain the authentic nature of what it means or what the life experience is to be an African. Okay, that's why I had to say what I had to say because
Yeah, I
because
see that
not
now.
because of breaking stereotypes to all go UK on a Nigerian food kind of thing. Like you put this here. This is called EBA. It's called EBA. Calm down. Jeez. You put it here. Guys, this is how we eat it here. So this is just us trying to revolutionize the food we have here. Gary, you call it cassava flake. That kind of when we interview that person, like I'm breaking out of a stereotype of the cliche things. Honey, no, you're not breaking out of a stereotype. You're
No, yeah,
stepping into another
right
stereotype.
into it. Yeah.
So that's why I had to say what I had to say. So what's your take on that one? How do the African podcasters break down the stereotypes and challenges existing in the narratives through our storytelling? and still preserving the authentic self that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And also that I mentioned perspectives. Now, as with everything that, even with visual content, right? You hear a lot of, even in some of our movies, when they showcase Nigeria or parts of it, sometimes we just focus on all of the negative parts. And then
Mm-hmm.
these contents are going to be consumed not just by Nigerians, by people outside of it. And then they consume it and they think, oh, this is how these guys are. And then they visit and they're like, oh, this is quite different from what I've been
What they
seeing.
know. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's all about just shifting perspective. Trust me, there are a zillion things that you can say about Nigeria without breaking the authenticity of what it means to be Nigerian. I listen to a travel podcast sometimes, right? And then this lady, she literally transported me to the place that she was talking about. I've never been there. I literally had to go research on the place. The place is in Nigeria. It's in the north, right? She was just
Wow.
talking about this beautiful place somewhere in Bauchi, right? That she had visited, and she painted all of these colors, all of the things that she saw, how calm it was, as opposed to the narratives that everywhere there's unrest everywhere in the north. She just painted that whole beautiful picture, and I felt relaxed just listening to her. And at the end of that podcast, what I did was I literally went to research on the place that she was talking about in Bauchi. I got visual representations that matched that description. And it just
Wow.
sort of brought the picture more alive in my mind. And that's the beautiful thing about storytelling. It doesn't matter what you are, either you're talking about it from a negative perspective or the positive. As long as you're talking to a human, or a human would listen to it, depending on how wide their imagination is, they will definitely imagine something, right? Which is why I like to read books too, because it just opens your mind up to just imagine as far and as wide as you possibly can, right? But so yeah, perspectives, you really cannot, you there are ways for you to tell stories without breaking your authentic self, right? One of the challenges, or the issues that I had with or that I still have with traditional radio is, sometimes now, probably it's because of my training in journalism school, right?
Okay.
When you are given a name to pronounce, you pronounce it the way it is. Like, you pronounce it how, and someone from that ethnic group or from that locality or from that nationality would pronounce that name,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I noticed that when you're in the newsroom or something, right, when they are foreign names, people will literally go to research on how to pronounce the name correctly. But you want to say a Nigerian name, right? You're not from that ethnic group. You don't know the correct pronunciation, but you ask, because it's a Nigerian name. You think you can just murder
Wing
the
it.
name exactly, and then you murder it, and now there's a problem,
Oh,
right?
wow. Huge
So,
problem. Because
and
because I
then
could
you
say
hear,
that there was a
yeah,
time in school, a lady was addressing the whole crowd, and then she was reading the names of people who to come out and take a certain awards, right? So there was this guy called Bundi or something like that. Sorry, where if you're here, I'm so but his name was so strong, so gun, 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 and like that's how you hear it. It's like a gun or something. So when she got there, she did a gunna gun gun dundi. We would never, ever in our life forget that boy because of that lady. But he didn't get up because he didn't know that was him. He sat there. I'm like, who's that person? I've never met that person.
right?
Innocently, because he didn't know that was his name.
Right. So,
So
I mean, the issue with things like this is, and then sometimes you're calling a traditional name. They're calling um maybe Ifeoluwa, for instance, and then you go Ifeoluwa, like you use, like, come on, can
you're
we?
nicer. At least I could hear you felt lower from your
I
mouth. Some
mean,
persons are
because
really
so when I heard those things on radio, I'm like, bruh, for podcasting, there's something that we call gatekeeping, right, in media, and traditional media has that on lock, right? But for podcasting, the gatekeeping is, it's flexible. I won't say it's non-existent. There are some, things in place, but it's a lot flexible. So with that, you can always tell your truth, right? At least within the guidelines of not using profanities and the rest, right? You can always tell your truth. You can always share things from your perspective, right? And still maintain your authentic self, right? That's the beautiful
true.
thing about podcasting and storytelling. And I don't want us as podcasters to fall into that trap of, oh, I'm woke now, so I can, let me just try to funkify.
Oh,
When you're laughing, it's the truth. Let me try to funkify um something just to sound posh. Trust
mm,
me, the person that is listening to you wants you to sound like their next door neighbor that they are catching up with. But you're going to lose that person because you want to sound like someone in their
and
abroad.
you're not.
The people in their abroad want to hear someone that sounds like them, that has all of these little tiny tiny things that they hear in themselves. But
Hmm.
instead, you're sounding like people that they hear or listen to on a daily basis. They're even tired of that. So honestly, I feel like in trying to step out of the box, it's not hard. The the hard part is trying not to fall into that trap of, um in stepping out of the box, you're not stepping into the trap of what you're trying to avoid. I don't know if that makes sense, but at the end
Hmm.
of the day, as I've said before, you can share your perspective. You have all of the power in your hand, right? You have all of the power in you. Use that voice, channel it the way that you want the conversation to go. And you will see that
Exactly.
people would resonate and respond and relate with that thing that you are pushing out there. And I tell you that we are doing a whole lot. Podcasting is changing the game. I mean, now companies both here and abroad now they literally have budgets. They
For
literally have budgets
podcast.
exactly to run ads and to do interviews and stuff. They have budgets for that. That's how huge the podcasting scene has grown, and it's going to grow more. Now the question now for that I have for podcasters is, would you continue with that authentic self that you brought forward, or would you allow the stereotypes of you must sound a certain way? Because there's a time on radio that if you don't sound a certain way, it doesn't matter how good you are, it doesn't matter
You
the
are out of the
qualifications that
game.
it looks is, you're gone. Right? But with podcasting, you can cut or circumvent all of that, right? You just need to make a choice, stick with it, and your community would definitely find you.
And that is amazing. We have a lot of questions for you, but this is how much we can take on this particular show right now. Oh, sorry, not a show. Interview, because we have an award to go back to. Congrats all the winners of the APVA 2023 awards. We love you, and because you're authentic, and that's why you've been standing, and you're now standing out above the crowd. So congratulations to you guys. But to sum up everything we'll be discussing with Tiyan today, Omonadu
Hey, I
is the
love it.
first step. Yes, storytelling is important in podcasting. However, you should understand that it's an illusion. when they say step out of the box and do something, because there is no out the box. You're
Yeah.
stepping out from one box into another box.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about someone else's perspective in
Yeah.
the whole opinion. So stick to what you know and be open to learn new things and accommodate new things as much as it is aligning with your conscience. However, the way, just remember, if you don't get anything from storytelling discussion with Tiyan, the way you beg for money from your family, the expertise you use, the story, or your friends, the scope, apply that into podcasting and storytelling, you'll go places
Definitely.
because
Or when you're giving your friend that hot gist, you know how passionate you are. Yeah.
that's it. That's all we're talking about. Stay authentic to yourself. Be passionate about what you're doing, and the way you tell the story hits the game. So thank you,
Yeah.
Tan, for joining
Thank you
on
so
this
much, Gwen.
discussion. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in, joining. Let's go back to the show and meet new and more people and more winners. And congratulations to you all. From
Yeah.
Guinevere, bye for now, guys.
Bye.